Welcome to Fearless Females, where ambition meets resilience. Meet your guide, Lorie Jones, president of Fidelis Wealth Advisors. Join her and remarkable women executives as they uncover the triumphs and transformative moments shaping extraordinary careers. Ready to be fearless? Let the journey begin.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm excited for another episode of Fearless Females. Today, we get to speak with Alanah Phillips. And honestly, you guys, she is one of my favorite people. She is just so happy all the time, bubbly and colorful and fun. And I would love for you to get to know her. So this is the thing I found the funniest about talking with Alanah today. She was telling me about how she started out at Target, but Target got too boring. And so she went into financial services. And that just made me laugh a little bit inside myself because I'm not supposed to be laughing on camera out loud. But it made me laugh that financial services in Alanah's mind, in my mind, is a fun, exciting, not boring place to be. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Alanah. Thanks so much. Let's get started. I have Alanah Phillips. I love her title and the way she introduces herself. She's an advisor advocate, a troublemaker, and a founder of Advisor Launch Lab. So thanks for joining us, Alanah. I'm so excited to hear from you today.
Always happy to chat with you, Lorie.
So the very first question I always ask is, I'm a reader. I love books. I love all sorts of books. What is your favorite book?
Yeah, I'm an avid reader also. I find getting lost in a bookstore to be one of my favorite weekend activities. So I have lots of them, but one that I always come back to that's been very impactful in my life is a book called 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman. And I have to reread it every year because it has really good reminders for us. And the subtitle is like Time Management for Mortals. Just about how, and it's funny, Lorie, because we just did time management with your team, but how anytime that you get lost in this, like everything's important and I have to do all this stuff and this myth that we can get it all done, it's a really good reminder to come back to, like, the faster that you respond to those emails, the faster that your inbox fills up again, right? And so, like, it takes the pressure off of thinking that you can do it all or that it matters to do it all. There's a chapter in it called Cosmic Insignificance. And it is the idea that in the grand scheme of the universe, you as an individual don't really matter that much. And that seems kind of sad or bad at some point, but it's also very freeing that, like, if you embarrass yourself, if you don't end up making some massive impact on the universe, which you probably won't, it doesn't matter. So you should just be yourself, have a good time, and do the things that you want to do, because in the grand scheme of the universe, it just doesn't matter that much. But it's a really, really fun book.
Yeah, I actually think I've read that one and I loved it too. It made me think that, like, really, we really only have a certain amount of time and we don't get any more. Like, no one gives us any more time. We just have to use what we have here in a really impactful way. And impactful meaning sometimes you got to stop and smell the roses, so to speak, rather than rush, finishing everything up,
Yep. No, he talks about that. Yeah. How are you using 4,000 weeks is the average length of human's lifespan. And we're lucky to get that much. But yeah, how are you using that time? Is it on the stuff that you actually say is important? Or are you spending it on trivial things? But yeah, the impact piece too, there's an illustration in there about, like the building the pyramids or building some beautiful cathedral somewhere in Europe, that a lot of the folks that built those things didn't live to see them completed, right? And all of us are in that situation, I think, with the impact we're trying to make. We're just putting the next brick into this building, right? In each thing that we do, putting that next brick, the next right thing, we have no idea the impact that it will make in the future. And that always encourages me too, right? Again, just do the next right thing. We don't yet know the impact that it will have, but you should still do it because it is contributing to a larger building project.
Yeah, I love that thought, that we don't know exactly what impact our lives will make. And we may not be around to see the end final impact of what they will, what our contribution will do to the universe. But
for sure.
But it is to say we aren't, having the next president or impacting, the next Gandhi or Mother Teresa or something like that. So keep putting those bricks in the wall, right?
Yeah, no, I love it.
Tell me a little bit about your journey. How did you get where you are today? Where did you start out? Tell me a little bit about Alanah.
Yeah, I thought I was going to be the CEO of Target. Like I started working in my red and khaki at 16, and I thought you just, work your way up to the top. And me and Greg Steinhoffel were going to be best buddies, and I was going to take over. So that fortunately that didn't happen. I left Target and went to Starbucks. And then I thought I was going to be the CEO of Starbucks, and that didn't happen either. I think I realized, Lorie, along the way in working in some of those corporate structures, that really wasn't for me. There's a bureaucracy, there's a lack of creativity, there's a lack of flexibility that I really craved and valued all those things. So when I jumped into financial services, I also had no knowledge of the work that we do here. I did not know the difference between stocks and bonds, quite literally, when I interviewed with the first company that I worked for in financial services, Lincoln Financial. And I learned so much in my first couple of years in this business, getting to shadow financial advisors and see the impact of what they did, which I thought was really cool. Again, all entrepreneurial business owner type advisors. And I didn't even know that this existed, that was a structure that existed. And so I did then think I was going to become a financial advisor because that seemed like a really impactful career to help people manage their money decisions and understand their money behaviors and help them to plan for retirement and protect their families and all those good things that advisors do. But also, as I sat in on many of those meetings, they were all too similar for me in a way that I was like, I think this is going to be boring. And so I obviously need more wildness in the type of work that I do. I think I do get easily bored. And the work that I do now is two parts. One, Advisor Launch Lab helps independent teams to hire and train new financial advisors. So I'm still getting to do some of that stuff I thought I would do and help impact the individual advisors that we work with. And then they impact hundreds of households of clients, which is a really cool sort of ripple effect that we get to participate in. I love helping to mentor new advisors because we get to share some of the stuff we're going to talk about in this discussion, right? Of the advice that we wish that someone had told us. We get to share that with those new folks and help them avoid pitfalls. And then the other side of my business is helping advisors break up with the firms that they're with and get into new relationships, either where they run their own businesses or where they're plugging into a team that's a better match for them in terms of their risk tolerance, risk capacity, and goals for their career. And that's really fun too, because each advisor is a totally different challenge. They all need help figuring out, should they make a change? One, and then how should they do that? Where should they do that? I get to catalyze a lot of growth decisions with advisors in that space. And that's really cool too, to see the ones that maybe needed the encouragement to make a change, and then how much that can impact their earning potential, their control of their time, and their ability to make an impact with their clients. So that's how I spend my time now, is in that space. And I will say the entrepreneurial journey has been challenging, interesting. It is still an experiment. There's still so much to learn there, but it's also been a really fun, creative space.
I love that. I think it is hilarious, Alanah. You said, I went to Target. I found out it was like straight laced and kind of boring. So I went to financial services. What? Are you kidding me?
Well, the thing is, like, we do have, yes, financial services can be very boring, but I have found my people in this industry, you're one of them, that we don't have to be boring, right? There is that space for us to not be boring. And we had a lot of fun at Target, right? I was HR, I was in charge of doing all our fun events. So, we did Mustache Mondays and Tuna Tuesdays and, all the dress up stuff and competitions and all that. We shot a music video, we had fun, but the business creativity was pretty limited, right? You had to stay within the constraints of this brand structure, of these policies, of this particular process for doing something. And that was less exciting. Financial services, very heavily regulated, very boring, but we get to make it fun.
Yeah. I love that. I'm on the same page with you there. I think finance is fun. It's just everybody doesn't know that yet. So we got to spread the message, right?
Yes, that is why we're here.
Tell me about the best investment you've made in yourself. Is there something that you can look back on and you're like, "Oh my goodness, I'm so glad I did that because if I didn't, I don't think I'd be where I am today."
Yeah, I had a tough time with this question, Lorie, as I was thinking about it, because there are some obvious things that I think are an answer to this question. Like, I didn't think I was going to finish my bachelor's degree. Like, I was in a leadership position at Target that I didn't need one to do what I thought I wanted to do is be like this HR regional leader. And so I almost didn't finish my bachelor's degree. I had like a really negative attitude about higher education and thought I was going to be fine without it. And I'm really glad I changed my mind on that. I got my bachelor's, I now have a master's degree. And those would have been things that would have prevented me from being able to take opportunities that I've been able to take, right? So it wasn't, I mean, I learned a lot in my master's program more than in my bachelor's program, but it was more about those being tickets to enter in many places that I know I talked to some folks that have not finished their education and think that they shouldn't, and I'm really glad that I did. But the more obvious answer to me, Lorie, and it's funny because I'm no longer with this partner, but I had a incredible supportive partner who encouraged me to take risks, who did the laundry while I was doing my master's program, who would pick me up from the airport when I was out traveling and trying to speak and establish myself as a thought leader. And that was such an important investment in myself, in that, like, when you have somebody who's a supportive partner for you, it is such a difference, whether that's a romantic partner, a business partner, whoever it is that's supporting you. That it was probably the greatest impact in terms of somebody who wasn't holding me back, who encouraged me to take those leaps into entrepreneurship, who challenged me to think about who I wanted to be, who allowed me the freedom and space to spend time on the stuff that was important to me to build, and said, yeah, let me know what you need. That's probably the biggest thing that has impacted. And I had bad partners in my life for sure. And that is a huge detriment, especially as a woman, to your career. If you are in a relationship with somebody who is not supportive of the things that you want to do.
Yeah, that's a really interesting viewpoint and really important. Something I don't think I've had mentioned before, but it does. You can only look at yourself in the mirror so long and say, I'm smart, I'm kind, I'm wonderful. You need somebody else there kind of backing that message up and saying, you are smart, you are kind, you're good at what you do, keep going, keep trying.
Yeah.
And we do need that supportive help. It's great that you find that in a partner, but like you mentioned, business partner, or, a spouse, or just a very supportive friend. We all need those. Find our tribe, right?
100%. Yeah. No, I think it makes a big impact. And I look at, again, specifically, I think about women because that's something you and I talk about a lot, and obviously fearless females and the theme here. But I have women in my life who have partners who, again, in some way hold them back, don't tell them those things, are jealous, are controlling, whatever those things are. And I've watched that impact their career in negative ways that, like, I think it is such it is kind of a strange thing to think about, but I think it's such an important piece.
Yeah, that's so insightful. I'm going to think on that a little while.
Yeah.
What is the worst advice someone gave you? And did you take the advice?
The worst advice, like, that stands out to me in my career, and I'm sure there's lots of bad advice that I got that I mostly just ignored, but I had a really strong mentor of mine who was a powerful woman say to me, don't get ahead of yourself. And it was in the context of me wanting to take on other projects and do more things. And I was asking for responsibilities or the ability to do activities and projects that I thought were going to promote me and advance my career. And she said to me, don't get ahead of yourself. And it has stuck with me to make sure that I never say things like this, especially to the women that we work with. And I just, like, don't even know what that meant, right? Because I think the whole thing is that you should get ahead of yourself, right? Like, you should be trying to advance yourself. You should be striving for more if that's what you want. And I just, it sticks with me all the time where I'm like, I'm getting ahead of myself right now. Like we're doing stuff we're not ready to do. And that's so exciting. And those times when I have leaped into things without knowing for sure how I was going to accomplish something, you learn so much so quickly, even if there's some failure in that. And so that's the worst advice I've ever gotten. And I did not take it.
I actually love one of my interviewees said everything is figure outable.
Yeah.
And she's like, I just sort of started doing it and then I figured it out. And that I love that sense of confidence and like, hey, we're going to do this. And if I don't succeed, hopefully I learned something.
Yeah, no, I have on my desk like stoic principles that at the beginning of this year, I did like Ryan Holiday does a beginning of the year challenge with the daily stoic. And one of them is to consider everything an experiment. And I think that that is important. Like if you go into it that with that mentality of, I'm not even trying to do X, right? I'm just trying to figure out the process to get there. And in that, I'm going to learn a bunch of stuff. It takes away the pressure of like, I have to succeed at this thing because the thing that you're trying to accomplish is figuring it out, right? It's the figuring it out part that is the accomplishment.
Yeah. And I love that idea of like, if I don't succeed, like there are times when you just don't, when things just don't go well and you flop.
Yes.
But if you don't succeed, like learning from that experience and not holding it against yourself, not beating yourself up for having that.
Yeah.
What others might consider a failure. I call them learning experiences. I have a lot, right?
100%. Yeah. No, I think Adam Grant did a study. He's an organizational psychologist where they sent out two groups. And one of the groups, they said, go learn as much as possible. And the other group, they said, fail as much as possible. And then, however they measured this within the context of that experiment. But the group that failed more actually ended up learning more.
Yeah, I love that. And you're less reluctant to try. Like if you know that failure isn't something that's going to be held against you, you're not going to be beaten up again, because you tried and didn't succeed at something. Like that makes you more willing to try again and again and to learn something from it. And that brings that creativity that we were talking about, right?
Oh yeah. No, so many fun things to be learned from experimenting.
What about regrets? And I'm maybe not talking about like, hey, I regret that, I would never do it again. But what about looking back on your journey? Is there something that you're like, oh, if I knew now, if I could go back and do that again, I would do it so much differently?
Yeah, I don't have a ton of stuff like that because of what we were just describing, right? Of like, I was doing the best that I could with the information that I had at the time. And I give my past self a lot of grace for that, right? Like, of course, we would handle things differently now with the experience and information that we have. But I do have one moment that I think about in my recruiting career where I had this, it was one of the largest deals I had ever worked on. And there was a lot of complication to it. We were having a struggle with the team that this advisor duo was joining. The team had some individuals that, for some reason, we had conflict. They thought that I was trying to force things to happen or that I was keeping stuff from them. Like there was just a missing trust with one of the folks that was on the team that was their practice manager. I had a transition team who was not very strong. And so that caused me anxiety that they weren't going to take care of these advisors in the way that I would. So all of these elements, and then the recruits themselves that are challenging to, again, help people figure out, should they leave? How do we do this? All the things that go into having to leave somewhere that you're working and conducting business and go somewhere different, the meshing of two teams together, all this stuff. It's part of what makes it fun. But this particular instance, I spent so much time trying to control the situation, right? To keep the negative stuff that was happening with the team from the recruits, to keep the transition teams, lack of experience from the team. And so I spent way too much energy controlling the narrative of everything. And I ended up, the transition lead had a meeting without me and I lost my ish, Lorie. Like I'm not an angry person. And there was just because I had so much energy invested in this and it was consuming everything, I yelled at this transition lead and I had to call and apologize. Like I absolutely lost it. It's one of the last times that I can think about in like the last decade where I was just so angry because I had spent all this energy trying to control it. And hilariously, the deal fell apart, right? Like the recruits ended up going somewhere else. And it was one of those experiences, while absolutely devastating because I had put so much time and energy into it. When I look back at it, I learned not to do that, right? Like I can't curate and control everything that everyone does. And I was holding on to things so tightly that I probably crushed it, right? So it was an interesting learning experience for me of just letting things be what they are, trying not to hold on to things or control them so much. Because when you do that, you are not allowing the authenticity of the situation and everything to just come together. And I think about that in every matchmaking situation that I deal with now of just not holding on to those things so tightly.
That's a really hard thing to do, though, too, right? Because most of us entrepreneurials are type A personalities, and there's a lot of control involved in that
Yeah.
personality type. We want things to go well. We want them to move well. We want them to sit well. We want everyone to do their job and do it excellently. And it's really, really difficult to step back from that piece.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I think, like, I still care very much about the experience of anybody that I work with. That's important. But there's a point where it's like, and this is, again, true of friendships, romantic relationships, business partnerships, client experiences, where it's like when you're forcing something, though, and you're having to like hold all these pieces back from collapsing on each other, like sometimes that's an indicator it might not be the right thing.
And it's hard on the other side to kind of take a step back and take a step back from that and let it
Yes.
implode and be like, this was never meant to be,
Yes.
especially when you want it so bad, right?
Oh yeah. No, but again, that's where it's like I think that when you let go of you're not holding on to something so tightly, you don't crush it. So you allow it to be what it's supposed to be.
Alanah, if you could go back and talk to yourself at the beginning of your journey at about 20, 21, 22, like just at the start there, would you have any advice for her, for your 20-year-old self?
My 20-year-old self was more sure of herself than I think I am now. Like she was absolutely ready to take on the world. But I think, like, similarly to that lesson around the regret of just not taking anything too seriously, right? Like, everything changes. So to not hold on to things too tightly because life is just change, right? You have to be adaptable. So I think not taking things too seriously, not holding on too tightly, and not taking anything personally. That's another lesson I feel like my younger self thought, something was being done to me or the reason somebody was behaving a way had something to do with me. And me now knows that that's almost never the case. And if you don't take things personally, it makes it a lot easier to keep moving forward and not get caught up in that.
How do you not take things personally? Like I struggle with that so hard. I am like, oh, they don't like me. And you're right. Most of the time it has nothing at all to do with you. But how do you get those skills to realize, like, do you just self-talk or like what?
Yeah, I'm sure there's some self-talk in there. I'm sure some of it is just the experience of working with more people. I'm sure some of it is books and podcasts that I've listened to, but I think at the deep psychology of it, one of the concepts I think about is we get caught up, like you do something embarrassing, right? Like I sang a song poorly on Tuesday at karaoke and I was like, oh my gosh, like everybody's going to be thinking about how I didn't hit that note, right? And not a single one of them is thinking about that at all, right? They're thinking about how bad they sounded when they were singing their song and wondering if I'm thinking about it. And so, like, they don't even have any time to think about me not hitting that note because we're all consumed with our own stuff. And when you realize that, I think it's really freeing because now I can just sing whatever song I want. And I know not a single person in that bar is ever going to remember that I didn't hit that note. They're thinking about their own songs. And so, that then applies to bigger stuff where it's like, if somebody was mad near you, like it's probably just because they were hungry or they didn't sleep enough last night. Like the reason that they don't like you doesn't have anything to do with your behavior. It has to do with somebody in their past that hurt them that you remind them of, And so it is definitely, I still feel those things, right? Like I feel the embarrassment or I feel like somebody doesn't like me and that hurts my ego, but I can talk myself into, they're not even thinking about me at all anymore though. Why am I allowing them space in my head?
Oh, I like that idea. Like, stop giving them space in your head to take up because you've got other things to do. You got to, tell yourself you're kind and wonderful and beautiful and that you're doing great things and you don't have time to ruminate on all, the mistakes or the embarrassing things. I like that. I like
Yeah,
that.
no, that can take up a lot of space for sure.
Yeah. Did you have anything that was scary when you started out? And is it still scary?
I'm sure. I'm sure there's lots of things that are still scary. And I still, in spite of what we just talked about, I still have a ton of self doubt and frequently have to go to those folks in my life or my support group for those reminders that I'm good at what I do, right? Like I think many of us have that imposter syndrome or the doubts about our ability to serve others, to do a good job. So I'm sure there's still fear around that. I think about something that's changed, maybe that I was afraid of, Lorie, I like to dress fun. And at the beginning of my career, I certainly was more conservative around how I presented myself. I think this is normal and I probably encourage it in some ways of like at the beginning of your career, you are trying to establish yourself as a professional person. You do have to build that reputation so that you can have a little more audacity. But I definitely had less of that at the beginning of my career. I dressed more masculine. I dressed more conservatively. And I think about now when I walk into rooms in like hot pink jumpsuits and sparkle shoes of like, that is so authentically me. And I have reached a point in my career where like, I don't care if anybody doesn't take me as seriously because of it, because that person isn't my people. But I definitely tried to conform more at the beginning of my career because I was scared of what someone would think about me as a young, inexperienced woman who had no idea what she's doing. And now I want them to know that I have no idea what I'm doing and I'm okay with that. And there's much less fear showing up in those spaces that way.
I think some of that comes with maturity too, don't you? Like you grow into who you really are and you get past that stage fright,
Yeah.
so to speak. Yeah. Because I actually only have two colors in my wardrobe, black and blue anyway. So
Yeah, but if that's you, right? Like that's authentic. If you're not somebody who wears hot pink jumpsuits and then you tried to, it would be weird. So I
yeah.
think that's authentic.
But I do like to have just a little bit of personality, just a little bit of me somewhere, in my room. I had my hot pink pencil holder on my desk, and that was
Perfect.
really, really out there for me.
Perfect. I love it.
What about unique challenges, Alanah? As a woman, did you face anything that you were like, it was challenges just because you were a woman?
Yeah, I'm really fortunate because my experience coming into financial services, which is predominantly male and older, right? And I came in, I still am very young, but I was younger when I started. I had an all or almost all female leadership team that I came into. And so I actually didn't realize that financial services demographics were the way that they were because I had really strong women who were responsible for all the decisions of our advisor group. And the advisors respected them and listened to them and admired them. And it was a really special group that I'm still very close with many of the folks that were a part of that leadership team and those advisors that we supported. So I think there were other challenges, of course, but the being a woman part, I had a really privileged little place that I came into the industry in. So there's certainly still plenty of times that I think someone has found out how old I am and realize like, oh, I'm the same age as their daughter or something. And I can see that shift that's happening where all of a sudden the fact that I had come in and was providing them advice or valuable education, like there's a shift in that I've watched happen before for sure. Cause again, it's almost exclusively, 50 and 60-year-old men that I'm working with most of the time. So I have that happen sometimes. There are certainly times I walk into a room and again, I'm in my hot pink jumpsuit and I can tell somebody's not taking me as seriously. But also, I think at this point, I have had more positive experiences because of being a woman in this industry than the negative challenges to it. And some of that may just be my attitude, but some of it is also, again, I've had such tremendous privilege to be in those places where the culture and the energy was already set up in a way that benefited me.
Yeah, I think it's an important point too that there are women in the industry, there are women in financial services, and we do want to see those other women come up and succeed. Like this is a great career. It is
It
so
is, yeah.
fulfilling and rewarding, and it's just so great. So I love that your experience started out positive because of other women in the field. I'm
Yeah,
so
100%. And Lorie, we've, connected on this I think when we met, but it's why it's important to me both of the types of ways that I work with advisors for me to give that especially to the younger women who are coming in the industry of like this is a cool place and there are so many spaces that we can exist in and have power and control and authority and creative freedom and all the things that I want them to have. And having experienced that myself, I want it even more so for newer folks that are coming in.
Alanah, what is the thing you are the most proud of?
So when I was at Target, I did win best hair. Uh,
Yeah, great hair.
That's probably not the thing, but I am very proud of that. It was I'm very vain about my hair. It's a funny accomplishment, but I think probably the thing that I am most proud of, which, it's all related to this of um, the leaps that I have taken where I left something behind. And there's a number of places I can look back in my life, leaving an insular religious community, leaving a relationship that wasn't working, leaving a job that was fine, but the track that I was on was not where I wanted to go. I'm really proud of that ability to leave, which sounds sort of funny, but I think that there are so many people that stay too long in something, whether that's, again, a relationship, a party, a job that you're in. And part of what I do now, I think relates to that of like catalyzing people leaving things that aren't serving them anymore. And it's a hard thing to do. I think, especially the women that I work with, there's a lot of loyalty to companies that they work with, to relationships that they're in. But I've watched for myself when I've left things, the possibilities and the opportunities that have opened up when I'm willing to let go of stuff that might not have been serving me or might not have been aligned with how I wanted to exist. The growth and the opportunities have been tremendous. And it was really scary to do. It was scary to leave, but the leaving is what opened up the possibilities for what could happen next.
And there's so many possibilities out there. It's scary. It's scary sometimes to look at it because, I've been in the place that you work at where we were leaving one RIA and going to another. And it's a lot of work and
Yeah.
it's scary, but it's so worth it in the end. And if you could just see 6 months down the road and you're like, oh, this is all going to be worth it. Right.
Yes. Yeah. No, and I remind myself of that all the time. And again, I think it's something I do feel like this is part of my purpose to do this for other folks in my network. And I look back at I had a woman who I was really good friends with. We worked together at Lincoln actually, and I had a company approach me for a job that honestly was my dream job at one point. But at the point that they approached me about it was when I was at this precipice of deciding if I was going to leap out into my own entrepreneurial journey. And I'm so glad I didn't take that job. But it was such an incredible opportunity. So I had called one of my friends because she was perfect for it. and made an introduction for her to that company. And they ended up hiring her. I had to have conversations with her for weeks, though, unpacking the loyalty that she had to this team that we had worked with. They were kind of like pulling and clawing at her too, right, to try to keep her. But she doubled her income going from that role to this new role. She got to a place of financial freedom where she's able to make decisions in her life that she couldn't have before, right? And to watch that happen for someone is just like so cool, because she in an alternate universe of that, she stays in that role. She doesn't have that control, that power, and she didn't know what was possible for her until she had to leave and let go and take that risk. And it's just been really cool to see her flourish financially, professionally, personally, and all the power that came with that decision.
I love watching that happen. I love watching it when, especially women, because that I'm very pro women, but watching them come into themselves and realize that they could do and could be so much more, have such a more of an impact, and then finally internalizing that they're worth that they can do it and that they have that worth.
Yes, no. And we had to have that conversation so many times, but now she'll like text me and tell me like what her bonuses are that she's qualified for. She's got some variable comp in her role. And I'm always just like, F yeah, girl, like this is what we were talking about. Like, how I'm so freaking proud of her for, again, she needed somebody to be able to push her and say, no, you can do this, right? Because she also thought like, oh no, I'm not going to be able to do all the things on this job description. It was like, no, it's figure outable to your other guest point, right? Like you're capable of doing this. You're worthy of making this much. Like she was worried, like because it was such a higher amount she was going to get paid, that like for some reason she wasn't qualified to do it. And like, again, to see her flourishing now is like, yes, this is what we were talking about. Of course you deserve this. And I want you to tell me about it. I want you to be proud of it. I want you to own it. And that's a cool thing that I have observed in my life. That is a thing that I am proud of being a part of, that energy to other people.
Yeah, I agree. I love it. Any advice for a young lady who's just starting down this path where you're already so successful at it, the entrepreneurial journey, this is a kind of a unique place where you're at, but any advice for a young lady who's just starting?
Yeah, I think a couple things, Lorie. So one, to be audacious, I think is an important thing. There are many times in my career I look back on that, again, I think of that advice I didn't take where I got ahead of myself, right? Like I wanted to learn something, I wanted to try something. And I'm also grateful I had so many folks in my career that said yes to that, right? So be audacious, ask for the stuff that you want, but have a plan. I think there is some, the millennial Gen Z, right? Like there's this stigma that they're entitled and all that. And there is some, I think, immaturity or lack of experience, right? Where you go in and you want something, you do ask for it. And then the piece that's missing is like, here's how I'm going to do this, right? And especially for young women, I think we may get shut down more often than a young man who's asking for the thing that he wants because he's a go-getter and, we want to support him. And I've watched that happen too. So, we often have to come in with a plan more, but I think this is true for all young people. Like ask for the stuff that you want. If you want to learn how to make a website for your company, ask to do that and have your plan of how you're going to do that ready to present, right? If you want this job, have your plan of how you're going to execute on that job and go in with it. One of my mentors, the first time I ever did consulting for a team, Aaron Jung, who passed away this year, was such an incredible mentor to me. And so he said, well, if you want to learn how to do consulting for this team, right, like you need to put together a proposal of what you're going to do for them and how much time you're going to save them, and then quantify that time, right? You know how much these two advisors do in production. You know how much time you can save them by doing these, 5, 6, 7 things, and quantify that time for them, right? And it just like that concept for me, everything that I have done in terms of consulting comes back to that of like, oh, I've got a plan and I can demonstrate to you how I can provide value to you, how I'm going to save you time, I can quantify it. And who's going to say no to that, right? So ask what you want, have a plan, The last thing I will say, Lorie, in terms of advice for our young ladies is find male allies. Because again, Aaron, who I mentioned, was one of the best mentors that I can look back on in my career. At no point do I think that me being a young woman ever influenced any of the advice that he gave me. He taught me so much. He advocated for me. He always treated me the same as any of the other folks who he gave advice to. And I think about him. I think about Ryan McCloskey was somebody who just like let me go to conferences. I shouldn't have been going to conferences. It was not a part of my job, but he let me go to conferences and meet people and learn stuff and let me be in those rooms. Ross Riskin is somebody who introduced me to the American College that allowed me to host a podcast for them. And that's how I learned about how to become a thought leader and build these connections to folks that you have on your podcast that you and I have talked about, Lorie. And so finding those men who are going to put you into rooms, that are going to say your names in rooms, that are going to give you the advice that you need to propel yourself forward is something that I look back on and go, I can pinpoint these specific men who were so influential in my journey.
Yeah, I agree. I think that a lot of times they're in rooms that we aren't in, or they've been in the rooms longer than we have. And they want to help. I mean, a lot of times they just do. They've got, I say all the time, they've got mothers, sisters, wives, daughters, and they want them to succeed. So they're willing to help. I love that idea. Thank you, Alanah, for all of your time today and for the benefit of your experience. If I have a young lady who wants to get in touch with you and ask more questions, how does she do that?
Yeah, I am very easy to find on LinkedIn. So if you connect with me there, my phone number is on the internet. It's my mom's worst nightmare, but LinkedIn message, phone call, text, whatever works. I am always happy to share anything I can, especially to help the women who are coming up behind us.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Lorie.